Why care about food waste? Fresh produce can be nutritious, tasty, and used in a variety of plant-based recipes, but it can also have a very short shelf life and may result in food waste if you don't store it properly or have a solid plan to use it. Not only is your wasted food a waste on your hard-earned money, but it is also detrimental to the planet. I'm Nichole Dandrea-Russert, Food Revolution Network's dietitian and recipe developer, and we'll be sharing ways to preserve your produce in today's How to Cook series. Here's a not so fun fact. Approximately 133 billion pounds of food is wasted every single year. You may be asking yourself why this matters. Here's some food for thought. Wasted food could help to feed families in need. There's lots of energy and resources used to produce food, including land, water, labor, energy, gas, and transportation. When food is wasted, unless it is composted, it goes directly to landfills where it releases methane gas, which is 21 times more powerful than carbon dioxide's impact on the environment. What's more, when it rains, runoff from the rain carries anaerobic bacteria that feed on wasted food to freshwater resources that create algae blooms that's harmful to species living in the water as well as to humans. Here's the good news. There are lots of ways you can preserve fresh produce at home to minimize waste. Tip number 1, separate ethylene-producing fruits and veggies away from those who are sensitive to ethylene. Ethylene is a gas released by some fruits and vegetables that causes produce to ripen faster. Some fruits and veggies are more sensitive to ethylene than others, like cucumbers, raspberries, and strawberries. Common ethylene producers include apples, avocados, bananas, cantaloupe, kiwi, peaches, pears, peppers, and tomatoes. Store ethylene producers away from other produce to prevent premature spoiling. Tip number 2, practice first in, first out. While this may seem obvious, pulling the old produce to the front of the fridge when making room for new produce will ensure that you are not consuming the new while letting the old produce go bad. Tip number 3, store herbs and certain veggies in water. Store the bottoms of certain vegetables like celery, asparagus, and green onions in 1 to 2 inches of water, and the stems of parsley and cilantro in 1 to 2 inches of water to extend the shelf life significantly. Rather than having to use them within a couple of days, you should be able to extend the shelf life for at least a week. If you change the water every few days, you may even get a 2-week shelf life. Tip number 4 is to avoid excess moisture. Moisture is tricky when it comes to produce. You want to keep moisture in to prevent fruits and veggies from dehydrating, but excess moisture can really zap the shelf life of produce. Your crisper drawer in your refrigerator is designed to preserve fruits and veggies with just the right amount of humidity and proper venting. If you don't have a crisper drawer, use vented containers or mesh bags to store produce. And if you wash leafy greens, make sure they are completely dry before storing them, or consider using a paper towel to catch any excess moisture. Tip number 5 is to revive wilted leafy greens with this one simple trick. Spoiled leafy greens that need to be ditched or composted may have an off aroma, be discolored, or have a brown colored slime. This would indicate that they are not edible. However, if your leafy greens are simply looking a little limp, revive them by placing them in an ice bath for 30 to 60 minutes or until they become hearty again. You can do the same technique with root veggies like beets or potatoes that have gone soft by storing them in cold water overnight. Tip number 6 is to freeze what you won't use. If you have fruits or veggies nearing their end, consider freezing them if you don't plan to eat them right away. Do this by spreading the fruit out evenly on a baking sheet first and then placing it in the freezer. Once it's frozen, transfer it to a freezer bag or freezer safe container. This process will prevent the fruit from sticking together and coming out in one big clump. To freeze vegetables, blanch them first for 1 to 2 minutes before freezing. This helps to stop the enzymatic reactions that could change their color and nutritional value. You can freeze lots of veggies from carrots to broccoli, potatoes, asparagus, okra, string beans, artichokes, Brussels sprouts, peas, kales, chard, and more. Tip number 7 is to keep a catch-all bin. This is one of my personal favorite ways to use up pieces of fruits and veggies. Keep a catch-all bin in the fridge for when you have small scraps of fruits and veggies and use them in everything from soups to stir fries to sandwiches. For example, if you have half of a leftover carrot from a recipe that called for a small amount of carrots, keep it in the catch-all bin and use it in soups, stews, or stir fries, or you can simply enjoy it as a snack with hummus. Tip number 8 is to make a soup broth. We are going to cover homemade soup broth in an upcoming how to cook video, but it fits well here too. You can make a nutritious soup broth out of veggie scraps like broccoli stems, beet greens, and carrot tops, or use the leftover veggie scraps from your catch-all bin. Add the scraps to a large pot and enough water to cover them with 1 to 2 inches of water room on top. Boil the water and then simmer for about approximately 1 hour. You'll strain the broth, store it in mason jars or reusable condiment jars, and compost the vegetable fiber if you can. Tip number 9 is to use overripe fruit for a variety of things. Add fruit that is overripe and needs to be used ASAP to smoothies or smoothie bowls. You can also make fruit leather with overripe fruit by adding the fruit to a food processor and blending until it's a thin smoothie consistency. Then with a spatula, spread it out so it's about 1/4 of an inch thick on a parchment-lined baking sheet. Dehydrate in the oven at the lowest setting for about 4 hours, flipping it over 3/4 of the way through. Get a berry and banana fruit leather recipe on the How to Cook blog. Also, you can blend and freeze fruit in ice cube trays and then add it to water for fun, festive, and flavored beverages. Finally, using the same blending overripe fruit idea, make them into refreshing popsicles if you have popsicle molds and sticks on hand. Tip number 10 is to dehydrate veggie pulp. If you have veggies that need to be used or veggie pulp from juicing or making homemade broth, try dehydrating and using the dehydrated pulp as breadcrumbs on top of plant-based dishes like pizza, casseroles, or vegan mac and cheese. You could also grind or crush the dehydrated veggie pulp with spices and nuts and seeds to make a delicious salad topper. Tip number 11, find a recipe that features the ingredient you need to use up in your fridge. This is another personal favorite practice of mine. If you have excess produce or perhaps you are growing food that is growing more than you anticipated, search the index of your recipe books or try Googling or searching Food Revolution Network's website by typing that ingredient into the search bar to pull up recipes, making that ingredient the star of the show. Hopefully this will help to avoid wasting the ingredient while providing you with some delicious plant-based inspiration and meals. All right, friends, I hope that you found these tips helpful and will use at least 1 or 2 of the produce preservation methods to help you minimize waste while enjoying your plant-based lifestyle. By doing so, you'll optimize nutrition, save money, and support the health of the planet. Thank you for watching today. See you next time in Food Revolution Network's How to Cook series.